Thanks, Rob. Thanks very much. I didn't really intend in the past to have my experiences go public, but I did want them recorded, and it was important to me that they never disappeared because they were important to me. I felt that they were significant because in many cases they were verifiable, which is quite unusual. And I've seen lots and lots of stories about ghosts and people talking about them on the TV and heard them on the radio. And the experiences that were depicted always came over sort of exaggerated and sort of almost fictitious, really, when people have gone to a place to look for ghosts, ghost hunters, and they walk into a building and then and everybody screams, "What's that?" Well, it's either a ghost or it's not, but why were they screaming? And I couldn't get that because my experience was, and there's been quite a lot, I suppose, that only on one occasion did I feel real fear, and on the other occasions, none at all. I mean, absolutely none at all. And they started when I was quite young. So I find that difficult to comprehend when I see these people jumping out of skins for really apparently no reason. Anyway, this is where I start off really. As Rob explained, I saw this charity event at a local sports club near to where I lived, and I saw Dr. Rob Gandy was giving a talk, so I went round and mentioned it to Rob, gave him a number, and he contacted me, and having met him a few times, I decided he was the guy I could trust to get all the information down as I wanted it down and kept. What I didn't realise at the time was it was like being interrogated by the CIA, because the detail he insists upon, and he goes back and he nails you for every detail that you could possibly give. It's quite exhausting, really, and I'm glad he did, because it made me think things through a lot better than I did. So that's how we got together, and yes, we share a birthday. I think it's quite obvious whose hair is white and whose is dark. So who's had the harder life, I wonder. Anyway, there we go. So we start really when I was a child, and it was in 1957. And we lived in Ashton Road in Hillside in Southport. And it was a summer's evening. I was 6. It was daylight. It was probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock. And as always, I went upstairs to bed, waiting for one of my parents to go up to say goodnight, read me a story, or tell me a story actually. Never had one, they always told one. And as I lay in bed, I noticed a figure of a woman emerging from my left, of an old lady, which she was translucent, but you could see she was wearing a blue dress with big white spots, moving across the room, and on the directly behind her was exactly the same figure, but totally transparent, with no colouring at all. And she slowly moved across the bottom of the room. And I moved down the bed to get closer to it. I wasn't in the slightest bit perturbed. It was just strange, I suppose. I was curious. She got towards the window and disappeared. So I went downstairs and I said, I've just seen a little lady walking across the bedroom. And my mother said, no, you must have been dreaming. And I knew it only just gone up, so I knew it couldn't have been that. So I said, well, no, I've only just gone up, I've just gone up. Anyway, they didn't make much of a fuss, and later on I went back upstairs, read a story, went to sleep, and that was the end of the old lady at that time. So I should point out that on my bedroom door there was no lock, there was no catch, there was no handle, there was nothing. My parents hadn't been in the house that long, but it was just a door, and that was it. Anyway, sometime later, it was 1962, my parents found a house that was in the same road, as my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins, all in one road. Not that far away, and they bought a house there, and we were moving. And on the day we left, I went over to my next door neighbour, which was a lovely retired old couple called the Mosleys. And they were both retired teachers, and I spent many hours in their garden, picking out their fruit trees, and in her kitchen, where there was always a smell of cooking, there was always fresh biscuits, cakes, scones, and so on. And on that last day, she said to me, I want to tell you, we decided we were going to tell you now, but we were never going to tell you when you lived there, because we didn't want to frighten you. She said, but when the previous occupant of the house was an old lady, and we noticed the milk was, bottles hadn't been taken in for a few days, so we phoned the police. And the police came, and they had to break in. And she was in the back bedroom, which was the one I occupied, and she'd locked it, so they had to push the door in, break the door in, and she was dead. And I described her, and they said they often saw her in a blue dress with big white spots. And that was my first event of seeing anything that was unusual. But it was nice that he told me on the day we left the house, I have to say. But I loved the house, I loved my time there. It was a beautiful place. So that was Ashton Road. Are we going to change? Oh, there we go. Is it that one? Yeah. Thank you. There you go. Right, there's the Footsteps of Midnight. We move on now. This was in the early 1980s, and I'd been taking a girlfriend home, and it was around midnight. As we were driving back towards her house, she was explaining she was very concerned about her father, who was a scientist for Pilkington Glass. She said she didn't know whether it was a health issue or it was just stress. So I pulled up the car under a street light to talk about it, because she was clearly worried about it. And we actually parked under what had been the Royal National Institute for the Blind Babies Home in Southport in the past. And we parked there and we're talking, and she's describing what had gone on with her father and so on. And I started hearing footsteps, heavy footsteps on paving. And I didn't pay much attention at first, but they just were persistent. And they sort of seemed to be coming closer and closer. So I sort of looked in the rearview mirror, couldn't see anything. Turned around eventually, looked over my shoulder, couldn't see anything. And the footsteps still got nearer and nearer to the car. Which was, okay, I thought it was a bounce, an acoustic bounce from somewhere. But then they walked straight past the car, right by us. I got out, opened my door, stood into the doorway, so the door's in front of me like this, looked around, nothing. This very calm young lady, who was as cool as ice, just screamed at me. And her exact words were, "Get me the fuck home." And that's what we did. So I drove her home, and eventually She went in and that was it. We discovered subsequently that the home, there's some detail, I have to check my notes on this when it was actually happened, but the home had actually been bombed during the Second World War in April 1941. It killed 3 nurses, but also all the 27 small children that were there remained unharmed. And this is just a few yards away, really, from the site of the Palace Hotel, which you may have heard, a famous, probably the only ghost story I ever hear about Southport, the haunted hotel, when they were demolishing it. All the power was removed, the cables to the lift were cut, but the demolition workers saw the lift going up and down, and it was a big deal at the time. It's just quite close to that. A few weeks after this episode that I experienced with my girlfriend, the owner of a large property just about 3 or 4 houses down was reported in the local paper, which was the Southport Visitor, saying that he wanted to have the house demolished because it was haunted, and he would refuse to have his children living in that environment anymore. Everybody said that's because he wants to redevelop and make money and stuff, and he actually got a reply back in the paper a couple of weeks later and said that's not the case. I will never have my family in that house again. Eventually it was demolished and it is now a block of flats. But that's what happened that's the footsteps at midnight. Here we go. That's the home as it was when we parked outside. It's now a new block of flats. The haunted hospital. Yes. In 1976, I was managing a large store on Lord Street in Southport, and each day, Securical would come and collect the cash. And over time, over the many months and months and months of this happening, you get to know the crew as they come, and sometimes the money's ready and sometimes it's not. More often it wasn't, and we sit and talk, and they're always the same sort of crews, 2 or 3 of the same, couple of guys. And one night we were talking when the head cashier was getting the money ready, and we were just talking about various things, and they pointed out that their company rather was acting as guards on a former hospital in Southport, and that hospital was the Southport Sanatorium for Children, which was in Hawkshead Street. And that had been empty since about 1971, and this is now 76. And they told me that initially they used to have static guards inside the building, obviously to prevent vandalism and theft and so on. But over time, the crews refused to stay in because they heard screams of children at night, and they just wouldn't stay. So they posted the guards outside in a secure van, and that's where they stayed. And at the time, it sort of appealed to me. I thought, I'd like to stay there. I really would like to stay. So I said, yes, I'd stay there. I'd go in there overnight, love to. And they went, nah, I bet you wouldn't. And I said, yeah, I would. And they said, well, we'll bet you 50 quid, you wouldn't. So I went, you're on. 50 quid was a lot of money to me, 76. Wow. So, anyway, that was the plan. I have to admit, over the subsequent days, I wasn't feeling that brave. The sort of, it dawned on me, maybe these burly security cars didn't take it. No, maybe not. But I did think, well, maybe if I did hear a scream, I could leg it out, because I know there'd be somebody outside in the van. Anyway, as it so happens, they said that their boss had said, I can't do it, because the insurance wouldn't allow it, and I wasn't a member of the crew, one of their staff. And to be honest, I was really, really pleased about that, and it's now been torn down, but it was a it was used for children from all over Britain to recuperate whilst under medical supervision. Although if you saw the building as it was, you'd have thought it was like a workhouse really. It was a gruesome sort of place. That makes it look nicer than it really looked when I remember. So that's the haunted hospital. The ghosts of the Ainsdale line. I don't know if anybody here knows Ainsdale. The Ainsdale line is actually Ainsdale-on-Sea, as it was known then. And there was a railway station called Ainsdale-on-Sea Railway Station. So many people in the 1930s and early 40s used to go to Ainsdale Beach that the railways, the trains that arrived at Ainsdale-on-Sea Station had to do 2 stops. They were that long to get the first lot of passengers off, then the train would move further along the track, and then the next lot would go on. It was hugely popular, and I got photographs from that time, and you just see millions of people all over the beach in the sand dunes. It's an extraordinary place. Anyway, in around 89, I became involved in the redevelopment of the place. It had been built in 1933, and it served teas and refreshments and changing rooms and so on. But in the 70s, and then 1941 to 46, it was a naval gunnery school called HMS Queen Charlotte. And they actually had a gun emplacement in the sand dunes which you would fire out to sea. And then after that, after the war, it became a cafe, and then a nightclub, and then so all sorts of things it became. But I became involved in a complete redevelopment of it, and we spent a lot of time there with architects and planners and all that sort of thing. And the first thing we did was get in the main building, it was composed of 3 buildings really. But the main building, we decided to establish a restaurant. And I used to go there. In the winter time, it's a sort of a miserable. It was a stupid idea anyway, really. But it's a desolate place in the winter because it's pitch black, and you know it's just miserable, cold, windy. And in the mornings, it's not much better. But I used to go in sometimes quite early. We'd have early morning meetings, we'd have all sorts of things. The restaurant had been sort of prepared as just to get one bit of it going, if you like. But I'd go in the mornings, and there'd be in one area particularly, there was always a very strong smell of tobacco smoke. I mean, really strong. Not an unpleasant smell. I used to smoke like a chimney, but the tobacco smoke smelled great. Every morning, and after about 5 minutes, gone. So, got used to it really, I just, you know. Anyway, that happened for months really. And then we were having a meeting one early evening, about 6 of us, on a raised area in the restaurant. And there was a lady colleague opposite me, as we're talking and making plans and discussing what would work and what wouldn't work. And her face just visibly changed. She went white, ashen, and looked shocked. Didn't say anything. And the meeting concluded a few minutes later. And I took her to one side and I said, well, what is it? Are you all right? I thought she was ill. She said, I saw something. I went, what? She said, there was quite some distance away, probably, I don't know, not that far to that bar over there. I love a bar. Anyway, it was about that distance was an entrance to the kitchen, and she was facing that, and she looked, and she said, I saw this figure, this black figure, and it just was there, and then it just disappeared. And it really shook her up, and she didn't go back. Never saw her again. She wasn't involved with our company, but she never came back into the building. It upset her that much. And then probably my final encounter there, I got used to this thing. I used to keep seeing a figure out the corner of my eye. It was a vast place, but you could just catch something so often. And eventually I decided to call it Fred. So I go, hello Fred, like the tobacco smell. I used to go in and say, morning Fred. You just get used to it. But this night, it was actually New Year's morning, and it was about 2:30 o'clock. Everybody had gone out of the restaurant. The staff that were there were enjoying a free drink, which they well deserved, and I was starving because I realised I hadn't eaten anything all day, and I didn't want to drink, I just wanted food and bed. And I walked into the kitchen to get anything, and the catering staff had cleared up, everything was away, sealed up, done, there was nothing to eat. And I thought, typical, all words to that effect. And just about to turn and rejoin the staff, as close as somebody stood here, right there, in my ear. And I just, Happy New Year, Fred, sorry, and just went straight out to the others. I said, Sam, just wish him Happy New Year. And that was the last time I had a problem or anything in my life that happened in the Lido. However, I had met one of the builders who'd been involved in some refurbishment work in the 70s, and he explained that because it underwent so many facelifts and things, that place, they were working on the building, the main building, and they used to sleep there. And they did this for about 3 nights, and then they just decided never again. And what had happened, they would hear so much noise and banging and strange sounds that eventually they decided the first one out's the winner, the last one out's the loser, as it were. And they said they used to go in the mornings, and all the kit, all the tools, everything being moved around, and boxes of nails were slung everywhere and screws, and it was completely sealed. They said nobody else got in, it was only us, but they just hated it, and they were glad to see the back of it. So that was the Ainsdale Lido, and the events that happened there. One night, leaving the Lido straight up, it's about 3 o'clock, half 2, 3 o'clock. This is Shore Road, heading towards Southport. The Lido would be back down there. I was driving along the street lights, as you can see, and there's an incline. And as I reached, not far really, where that red car is, I saw what I described as a really big cat slowly walking across the road. About the size of an Alsatian, but with the classic tail, the shape, everything else. And it slowly walked, and you could see it well. I was about 15, 20 yards away from it. It didn't seem bothered about me. And off it went, and I continued along. But the next day, I was so interested in this, I thought, well, somebody should know about it, surely. And I checked on the internet, and there's a place they wanted to know about big cats, if you see one. So I reported it. I phoned them up, and I said, I've seen, I think it's a puma or a panther. It's probably a puma. And I thought, they're going to be interested. Oh, yes, where did it? Yeah. Shore Road, Ainsdale. Yeah. What time was it? 5, yeah. I said, you don't sound surprised. Oh no, we get a lot of this. And that was it. So that was the big cat. Now there is a story about a hellhound of Formby and Ainsdale aren't that far apart. Some call it Old Trash. It's a hellhound. It's more of a myth. It's been written about many times, but very few people have ever seen it. I've never known anybody else. But in terms of wildlife around there, certainly you could easily feed several of these big cats. In the morning, near where the Lido was, you would see maybe 100, 150 rabbits every morning, all over the place. There's tons of food, so there wouldn't be a shortage of food. But there you go, that was the Ainsdale ABC. There we go. The phantom hand. This was a further incident at Ashton Road. About 1959. To describe the house, the rear of the house was very well elevated. There were three steps and then a platform, and then you went another step into the house at the back, but it was on street level in the front. But I was on this summer's day, I was playing with my elder brother in the garden, one of the few times we actually got on. And we decided to go get into the house. So we climbed up the side, turned right towards the sink to wash your hands, and to the ever-open window which overlooked the garden. My mother always had the window wide open. And as we turned, there was a hand at the window, a human hand, just like that, right there. And I didn't say anything, and amazingly, my hysterical brother didn't say anything. Nothing. And then we both turned, shot down, and went down the side, turned left, and stood underneath the window like that, because that's how elevated it was. So you couldn't put your hand up and be seen, even if you were. And there was nobody there. Nothing was there. But the hand was there. And we still hadn't spoken to each other. So I went, "Did you see it?" And he went, "The hand." So I knew that if I said, "Have you seen that? Did you see the hand?" He said, "Oh yeah, the hand." He'd say that because that's my brother. But I didn't. I said, "Did you see it?" And he went, "The hand." So that was the other strange thing about Ashton Road. Although I did find subsequently out that the night that they moved in, the landing light kept coming on, and they kept waking up thinking somebody, was it us or something, and it wasn't. And they actually got an electrician in to check it. And there was no fault, and it only happened on the night that we moved in, but it happened about 2 or 3 times, and Mother subsequently told me. Where are we now? Liverpool Road. This is the only time, and this is the exception to the rule, the only time I've ever been, anything's happened to me that's really scared me, and this did scare me. And it was around 1969, my brother had married, and he himself and his young bride rented a flat on Liverpool Road, which coincidentally had been my grandparents' house where my mother lived with her 2 sisters. But at that time it was being used as a doctor's surgery, and on the ground floor, so there was 2 surgeries, an office, I think a kitchen, and the waiting room. And the deal that they got, which was a good one, because it's a really spacious flat, was that I think it was either rent-free or a very, very low rent, I don't really know which one it was, if they would clean the offices, the surgery and the waiting room each day, ready for the patients, and that's what they did. Anyway, I was still living with my mother at the time, and we went up there one evening just to see them and have a drink and a chat and so on. And we'd done this for a couple of hours stuff, and then the banter between my brother and myself started to take place, which was very typical, normally led by him, and teasing him and so on, and then a bit of horseplay. And then he pushed me out onto the landing, And I thought, well, the idiot is going to have his foot against the door. So I thought, well, I'll just play with his own game. So I leaned against the door frame, really, just really laughing to myself. Thinking, oh, the idiot, there he is, straining to keep me out. And there I am, everything's fine. And it was like that for maybe a minute or so. And the longer it happened, the longer I was waiting, the more, the funnier it became to me. Until there was a sudden change. I was aware that something in front of me, very dark, very black, there was a presence in front of me, something evil. The only way I can describe it was it felt evil. And there was this noise, and I described the noise at the time as rubbing your shoe across concrete. That's the only way I can describe it. It was right there. And it was horrible. And I was really frightened. So I'm like this, really now pressing against the door frame. And I put my hand down to find the doorknob. And I found it. And I turned, and as I turned it, pushed the door a bit, and it moved in, and I just turned into it and walked into the room. And closed the door behind me. To which my mother said, "Are you all right, David? You look like you've seen a ghost." No, I'm fine. I'm just very tired, really tired. Really want to get out of the place. And so I said, "No, really, we do need to go. We just ought to go." So I said, "Okay." So we went and get in the car. And my mother says, "Now, what really happened, David?" Nothing. She wasn't having any of that. No. So I'll tell you when we get in. So within half an hour, we were sat drinking tea, smoking cigarettes. My mother smoked. I used to smoke like a chimney. Thank God I stopped. I told her what had happened. And her reaction surprised me, because she didn't interrupt me. But she then said, and she looked me straight in the eye, she said, "I'm going to tell you something, David, but you must promise me not to tell your brother, because you know he's a bit nervous." So I said, "Yes. Oh, I promise anything. Tell me what it was." And so she went on to tell me that obviously when she was a child, they lived there. Her and her two sisters and her mother and father. I knew my grandmother. I didn't know my grandfather. He passed away. But my grandmother was very much like Queen Victoria. She resembled Queen Victoria. She acted like she was the Queen. She was of that type. Children, actually, I thought she was great, but she had no time really for children. But she was good with me. But she said, every night we were woken with this noise on that landing. Every night. And I said to my father and mother, "Look," and I told them, and eventually, they moved. And she said, the noise was the tearing of lino. Okay. Sounds very much like, if you rub your foot with shoe against concrete, virtually the same sound, as I tried to find out, made sure it was. But they only moved a few hundred yards away to almost an identical size house. And I don't think they would have moved had they not been troubled by that experience. They'd had something. There's no way they were going to listen to the children and move house in a comparatively short period of time. So something happened there. Anyway, as the years passed, I became more and more interested in the history of the house and did find some records of two suicides which appeared to be in that property over different periods of time. Both young medics. One was a suicide in the bathroom, and another, I don't know where it was hanging And I just wonder if that noise was the rope. I just don't know. But it was an awful experience for me. It really was the only time I've been really frightened by anything. That night, I'll never forget it. So that's Liverpool Road. And strangely enough, a random photograph on Liverpool Road actually identifies the house, because that's the house. And in those days, the gardens used to come much further out. It was a much narrower road than it is now. So there you go, that's Liverpool Road. Now, Rob, this is an example of no good deed goes unpunished. Because I happened to mention to Rob about an experience I had many years ago in Bow Street in the 70s, when I went on a job interview. He's been into detail, he forensically gone into this. But what it was there was an advert for a job for a company called Computer Car. This was in the days of no laptops, no PCs. You know, but their operation was that they had a big database of cars up for sale, and a person looking for a particular type of car could phone in, and they'd hook them up with where there are suitable vehicles for sale of the type that they wanted. So it's quite innovative at the time. And I got this job opportunity to go up for an interview. They used to advertise in the commercial break of Coronation Street every night. So it was a big deal. I thought this could be really interesting. But I didn't actually spend any time in Liverpool at all as a child. Our family weren't from that area. They were Worcestershire or Manchester. So I really didn't know the town, particularly the city, particularly well at all. But typically I arrive, as I do for all appointments, and still do, arrive early, sight out where I'm going to go, and then I'm at ease. And on this occasion, it was an evening, it was a winter's evening, it was at top of Bold Street towards the Bondout Church, if anybody knows it. And I parked somewhere near the pier head and made my way through the city, walked up Bold Street, and eventually found where the office of Computer Car was. Happy in the knowledge that I was safe and everything was fine, and I wouldn't look an idiot by arriving late. And I realised I was 20 minutes early, so I thought I'd have a little look around. So I walked back down Bold Street. Because don't forget, Liverpool, after 6 o'clock, was dead in those days. I mean, absolutely dead. If you got to 6:30 and you saw another human being, they were a robber. I mean, they'd have a sack on the back. It was just dead in the city centre. There was just nobody there. And I found out subsequently, it went on for years like that. But nevertheless, on this night, I turned around, had a little look round, walked down, and I turned left into a street which I now know to be Slater Street. Very dark, nothing much going on. I didn't want to I didn't want to get far away. I didn't want to I'm going to be late. So I walked down, and I was attracted to a little old shop, very old shop, and there was a bit of a glowing light in its window. And I sort of made my way towards it, and it was just like something out of a Dickensian novel. Little square window, a doorway there, and I got to it. So shop, going to rob it, and I got to it, and it was old. There was little old violins and things in the window. It wasn't really a display or anything. Lots of dust, and it was just very old and quaint. And the light really was coming from the back, and I think my impression was it was more of a workshop than a shop. I thought, that's really, how interesting that is. like some out of the Sherlock Holmes things or something like that. Anyway, turned around, went back, had the interview, got on really well with the guy that was setting up the business. He was the newspaper was wrong about him and all sorts of things. And he there and then offered me a job. And although I was still had another job, I said, oh, he said, well, come over in the evenings and just see the effect what advertising has on the operators and how many calls we get, because they've got thousands of calls. So, okay, so I went back over about 2 weeks. I had to give a month's notice. About 2 weeks to view these things. And a couple of times, at least twice, possibly 3 times, but I know I did it twice, I tried to find this shop. Because it just looked cute. I thought it was really interesting. I thought I'd have a ring, I just couldn't find it, and I knew it had to be there because it wouldn't have gone anywhere else. It had to be there, but I could never find it. Anyway, I happened to mention this to Rob, and Rob says, "Right, well, having this one." So to speak. Sorry, Rob, you don't speak like that. He went, "Rob, we're having this one," and he's done some research. We actually went to the library, but he did research with, I shall just refer exactly, the Gold Map of Liverpool for 1888. He did this in Liverpool Central Library, where I joined him. And it highlights the entire area, which shows shops, workshops, and local records from 1835, 37, 48, 49, 1890, it's all musical instrument makers and sellers and so on. And it suggests this area was very dynamic and full of such workshops. But they were moving around a lot. So the likelihood is that that spot was occupied at some point in those later times by a violin repair shop or a violin maker. Yes, Rob. Yes, you can leave the room. I'm going in a minute.
What it is at the moment is Lloyd's Bank, which was built in 1922.
So that again, it's now Lloyd's Bank.
Yeah, which is a big white stone building, which is nothing like that picture from the late 19th century.
Yes, right. Yeah. Thank you. So there you go. So that's there was also a shop called Lawrence Naseby and Son in Wood Street, wasn't there? And which is about 150 yards from where Computer Car's offices was. So did I experience a time slip? I haven't got a clue. But the shop was there, but I couldn't find it in the end. You'd be glad to know that I've got towards the end of this. Those are my unexplained experiences in my life. As you know, I didn't intend to make them public. I certainly didn't intend to speak about them in person. I didn't even want my name to be used originally when they were published in Fortune Times. So I used the name David Barton. And on the day, which is my middle name, by the way, David Barton, and on the day that the week it was going to be published, a very influential Southport businessman called David Barton was sentenced to jail for serious fraud. So it left Rob with the unfortunate task of having to explain that the person he'd sent this information to for publication was still free and able to account. Anyway, thank you very much indeed.